Welcome, everybody, to this talk about Lyme disease, what everyone should know. Let me just go ahead and start sharing my screen. Um, can all of you see the slide that I'm posting? Can you just, yeah, okay. If you can just put a little something something. Perfect. Thanks, Cecily. Awesome. So welcome. My name is Catherine Gagnon, for those who don't know me, and I'm a health and life coach. I'm a Lyme survivor and expert, and I also have a primary healthcare nurse practitioner master's degree and applied neurosciences and evolved NLP practitioner. So all these titles, we're going to make it really simple for you today as you learn about Lyme disease. And this is really I titled it What Everyone Should Know because with Lyme disease, knowledge is truly power, and I mean it. So, what you're going to learn today is, you hear about Lyme disease, and a lot of people are saying it's so complicated. Yes, it can be very complicated, and my objective is for you to see this in a simplified way. Okay, I'm going to present a typical clinical picture of someone who is affected by Lyme in the different stages of the illness. And we're going to talk about a few preventative measures. So I'm going to let you know about my kind of stepwise approach to using different cocktails of things to protect myself from tick bites. And we're going to look at an overview of the journey back to health and what that looks like. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat right here, and I will be happy to answer them as I go. And I will stay after the presentation. If you want to ask some live questions, I'm happy to stay for a couple of minutes. All right, so let's dive in. So why am I talking about Lyme disease? So I am now fully recovered from a stage 3 chronic Lyme disease. And I know how to eat and how to sleep and how to move my body and what supplement to take in order to have sustained energy, mental clarity, have normal activities. So I work all day, and I mean, when I want to. I have some, very physical passions like hang gliding and bicycling and, hiking and things like that. I've done intensive, exhaustive research. When I got sick in 2016, I was working in the medical field as a nurse practitioner back then, and I didn't have, I couldn't find the answers. And I'm going to share a little bit more about why that was with you. I've invested, I stopped counting at $75,000 what it cost me to regain my health and my life. And I stopped counting, meaning it went beyond that. And if I had had the knowledge that I have today, and some of which I'm sharing with you today, I would have saved at least 50,000 out of the 75,000 and more that it cost me to regain my health and life. And I now live in a state of much more harmony between my body and mind, which was not always the case. So in 2016, I fell into the Lyme disease hell. And it started in June 2016, so about 5 years ago. Started to not be able to digest anything. My belly would bloat up. Anything I would eat, I would bloat up like I was pregnant 6 months, and it would be painful with nausea, loss of appetite. I had a spontaneous pneumothorax, so that is a lung that collapses on itself. I was having all sorts of muscles and joint pain. I mean, I'm a very active person. I know what soreness after exercise means, but this was a different kind of soreness. It was just pain. I had a spectacular weight loss on a body that's, already a thin frame. I mean, I couldn't sit on a chair without a deep cushion because my sit bones were right there, and it was just so painful, and my vertebrae were kind of sticking out, and I couldn't lean against a wooden chair, for example, because I had lost so much weight. I was feeling intense fatigue and intense weakness. So back then I didn't have as much hair as I have now because I was losing the hair, as if I was in chemo. So just trying to hold the hair blower, my arm just couldn't hold it. It was my arm was too weak. And I would do, let's say, 5 minutes of stationary bike and I would have to go to bed, basically. For someone who's very active, that was not fun. My vision was affected. I was seeing 2D instead of 3D, and I had a lot of floaters, and very hypersensitive to light also. So any light, strong light, or even in the stores, like these neon things, was giving me an instant headache, and I couldn't drive at night anymore because of that sensitivity to light. I started to search for my words, and back then I was still working as a nurse practitioner. So that was, I was seeing patients every day and doing my best to stay on top of things and not forget anything and, talk to my patients. But I had noticed I was searching for my words, like something as simple as, an object that is so known. And it would take me like a while to say that it's a pen. That was really distressing. I had zero concentration, no memory at all. Felt like, I was losing it basically. I was feeling a lot of states of anxiety and also like panic, which is not my type of person. Like I've been a hang glider pilot for 14 years. I know how to master fear and not panic. So I would come home from work and almost literally go into a panic attack over the impression of having forgotten a diagnosis, or having forgotten to examine the patient, or prescribe the wrong dose of things. And it was just really, really internal emotional hell. Afterwards, I found out I didn't make mistakes, but it felt like it for me at the time. I had a very like aging skin. I looked literally 40 years older. I was 36 at the time, and I looked like I was 60. Like I said, I was losing so much hair, like I was in chemotherapy. It's awful. And my periods started to go like every 70, 80 days. So it felt like premenopause at age 36. I was like, no, 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 it's not premenopause. I was having some night sweats and then intense chills. It would be the summertime, July, back home in Canada, and I'd be sitting outside. It'd be like, in Fahrenheit, it would be something like 85 degrees, and I was feeling like frozen. So I'd go between like, hot flashes, sweats, and chills. It's like my whole internal thermostat was completely deregulated. I was feeling a sense of depersonalization, as if I was no longer myself. I was seeing the world as so dark, and it's not me. I'm a very happy, optimistic, enthusiastic person normally. But I was experiencing this depersonalization, sensitivity to light. I said it. I was also having pain, not just in the muscles and joints, but also in my teeth, in my jawbone, and under my feet. I would get up in the morning, and it's like I would get onto a bed of nails, like a carpet of nails. Um, Going into the sun, I felt like burning sensations, and all of that developed in about a month or so. And so this picture on the left was taken in May 2016. And within 3 months, I went from this vibrant person, doing life, to flat out, no energy, just feeling like I was completely dying, literally. And I knew that something had to change. And the more I waited, the worse I deteriorated. But I didn't wait very long. I was doing a lot of research. Then I go to my doctor and I said, okay, order this test, this test, this test. I was doing a lot of research in functional medicine. And she was like, okay, you're a nurse practitioner. You should know what you're talking about. And it took me about 4 or 5 months to suspect that it would be Lyme disease. And so at the time, I did some tests with Lyme, and a bunch of other tests that, not much was coming out. And the initial test was positive, But where I tested in Canada, you do a first serology, it's called an ELISA test. And then if that one is positive, it gets sent to our national microbiology lab, which is in Winnipeg in Canada. And then they will do another serology, another ELISA, before they do a Western blot, which is a much more specific and sensitive test for Lyme disease. And so the problem was back in Canada, the ELISA test in Winnipeg came back negative. And so when my doctor received those tests, she was like, "Oh, Catherine, the first test was a false positive. You're really, we haven't found much stuff. You're a little bit anemic, if you want to take some iron, things like that. But really, you're just too stressed out." And I said to her, I said, "No." I said, in 36 years of living in this body, I have never felt like something is eating me up from the inside, literally. And so she was kind of a little bit dumbfounded. So I understood that I was on my own and I had to kind of roll up my sleeves and find what I had and kind of save my own life. So I did extensive research, hours, hundreds of hours of research. And because I was on the track of Lyme disease, anything I was finding, either treatment or a test, I would order that immediately. I just didn't matter what it was. And I started to treat even before I had an official diagnosis. I started to use some medicinal plants that have been used for like 25 years in the US by natural practitioners. And by doing that and following my intuition, I literally saved my brain, literally. So that's when, I kind of followed through and I discovered something that really changed everything. And I was skeptical at first. I didn't know if it was going to work for me, but what did I have to lose? I was dying. So I really persevered in a way I had never done before. And what happened when I had this first negative test from Winnipeg, I was still a nurse practitioner and I called them, over there and I said, "Hey, when someone gets a first serology that's positive, but your confirmation test comes back negative, what do you do?" "Oh," the lady says, "you just send another sample." I said, "Thank you." And I later found out that they only test one strain of Lyme, of Borrelia. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this later. But there are really 300 strains in the world. So it was possible that my strain wasn't coming up positive. So what I did is 3 months, because it takes time, right, to get the first serology, gets sent to the lab, gets back sent to my doctor. All of that took about 6 weeks. And so after I called the lab, they said, "Okay, do another sample." I said, "All right, this time I'm going to do another sample that I'm going to send in Canada, but another one that I'm going to send in the US." Because at the time, I had heard about a lab called IGNX in California. And so the same morning, I went to the nurse. I said, "Okay, 1 tube for here and 1 tube for here." And I sent them both. The one that I sent to Quebec came back positive. My antibodies had doubled, but yet the test from Winnipeg was still negative. And the one I sent to California, was fully positive because they did a Western blot immediately, which is the test that I needed in order to, to have that confirmation. So it was really a new start. And I built a protocol, a powerful protocol with medicinal herbs and supplements and diet, studying all of the Lyme experts, functional medicine, natural practitioners. And in 4 months on that protocol, I regained 80% of my normal. I regained energy. I was able to resume my activities, increase the dose of biking. I'd go for, at home it's kilometers. So I'd go for 1 kilometer, and then be able to go for 2 kilometers and 3 kilometers and kind of manage myself. But after 8 months on the protocol, I was at 90% of my normal, where I had sustained focused energy, mental clarity. My concentration was back. I had a good, stable mood. And the most important thing for me was the return of my muscles, so that I felt like I could be strong and I could do my activities like hang gliding. That makes me feel so alive and so good. And I was just so ecstatic that this happened. And that's when I realized that this is kind of unheard of for chronic Lyme disease. Because I was on forums and social media, and I was seeing a lot of people struggling with this for years, and they just weren't making any progress. So I was thinking, oh my goodness, if I have done this for myself, I can help others, because I had been, a nurse since 2004, nurse practitioner since 2012. I was a health coach since 2016, and I saw there was a serious gap in knowledge for Lyme disease in the chronic phase, not the acute phase, because that's very well, pretty well researched and known in the medical field, but mostly the chronic phases. And so it's been 4 years that I've been helping people save their time, their money, as they regain their health and their life. And this is my goal, that every person who's been suffering from Lyme for a long time, that they too can regain their health and their life without losing their time or money. And it's also my goal to spread this information so that everybody knows what Lyme is, how to protect themselves, and what to do in case they get sick. So this is the intention of this talk: how to recognize Lyme in its different phases, the ways to protect yourself and those you love from this illness, and how to go further and get your health and your mood and your energy back if you have been suffering from Lyme, or if you know someone who has been suffering from Lyme. This information, I'm telling you, I've had people over the years tell me how powerful this has been when somebody they know got bitten by a tick, or they met somebody who was suffering from chronic Lyme, or even fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome, because there are some medical hypotheses that are saying that perhaps fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome might be untreated Lyme. Okay, the symptoms overlap so much, and when they start treating for Lyme, people who were suffering from fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome, their symptoms improve, and they're like, oh, okay. So I'll tell you more about this, but I'm going to teach you as much as I can today. And I have built a course, an online course that goes into a lot deeper. It's 10 hours of material. But first, why do we talk about Lyme? So you probably are aware that in recent years, there's been a rapid increase in cases of the disease. It is mainly transmitted by black-legged ticks, but there are more varieties of ticks now that are known to transmit the disease. And the ticks are being carried by several different, we call them vectors. So in North America, the most frequent vector is the mouse, but also the deer and some migratory birds. Ticks can hook onto reptiles and also on domestic animals, cats and dogs. This illness is the first listed disease with a direct link to global warming. So we've been hearing about global warming, and it's the first time ever that we have an illness that is really speaking into the global warming, because populations of ticks have been found in higher and higher latitudes, up north in the world, basically. So Lyme disease has 3 phases, and I'm going to go into more details about each one of them. But the first one is the acute phase, which is within 30 days of a tick bite. So that's the acute phase. The second phase is the early disseminated. So that's when the pathogens, the microbes, the bacteria, virus that the ticks is injected into the body, they start to go a little bit everywhere. They start to disseminate in the body. And then, so that's between day 30 after a tick bite up until 3 months after the tick bite. And then you have late disseminated, or other practitioners call it chronic Lyme. That's after 3 months post tick bite. Currently, there are unclear or inexistent medical guidelines for phase 2 and 3. There's controversy and debates, whereas to even how to call this diagnosis, and if even chronic Lyme exists. So there's no consensus yet about these diagnoses. Some organizations will call, let's say if someone was treated in the acute phase or the phase 2, and they still have symptoms after 3 months, some organizations will call that post-treatment Lyme disease syndrome, where the hypothesis is that there's been like a immune activation with some inflammation that are responsible for the symptoms. And it's not clear if it's a persistence of the microorganisms or not. But some studies are showing that, yes, there are some persistence of the microorganisms. Like I said, the tests that we have, both in Canada and in the US, the CDC is still talking about the 2-step test with a first ELISA serology and then a Western blot. In Canada, with this approach, the ELISA serology and then another serology with the National Microbiology Lab in Winnipeg, and then the Western blot. With these 2 tiers approach, it is estimated that we miss 80% of the cases. Why? Because in order for the ELISA, the first serology, the ELISA test for the antibodies. And so if somebody has been in phase 2 or mostly phase 3, if they've been sick for a long time and their immune system has been activated like chronically, and their immune system is getting tired, if you will, the amount of antibody that the immune system has to produce in order to reach the threshold of positivity on that first ELISA requires almost an intact immune system. So that's kind of the first barrier, that ELISA test. So for me, when my first ELISA test was positive, my doc was telling me it was false positive. I was like, no, it's not, because my immune system has reached that threshold of positivity. So that's the first step. And then in Canada, the other ELISA test that the microbiology lab does in Winnipeg test for one strain of Borrelia. So the main organism, the main pathogen that is transmitted by the ticks is Borrelia burgdorferi. This is a spirochete. I'll show you pictures later. And it turns out that there are 300 strains of Borrelia in the world. So I remember very vividly when I first acquired Lyme, but I only kind of connected the dots in 2016 when I was sick and I had all these things and I was doing all this research. And then I was seeing all the signs and symptoms of primary infection in the acute phase. And I remembered, I was like, oh, when I was 20 years old, I was hiking in the woods in Australia. I was 20. I was not yet a nurse. I didn't know anything about ticks, but I remember having something on my chest and I would try to brush it and it wouldn't come off. And I remember looking down and seeing legs going like this, and I went, ah! And I panicked and took it out. And probably in the motion, I probably squeezed the abdomen of the tick. The head stayed stuck in there. And in hindsight, I remember having this huge bruise as if I had been punched in the chest. And that bruise lasted like 3 weeks. And I had all the signs and symptoms of the primary infection in the acute phase. So when I was dealing with all these testing issues in 2016, and I found out that the microbiology lab only tests one strain, I thought, oh, that might be why they're not detecting my strain, because I probably acquired it in Australia in 2000. And so then I was like, wow, how did this thing get dormant in my system for 16 years? But it wasn't very dormant. It was year after year, I would start developing symptoms, subtle symptoms, fatigue, pain, headaches, and this things like that. So the damages from the illness was kind of making its way in my body for 16 years until 2016 when it all flared up. I was lucky that, or by chance or serendipity, that a couple of months after I got bitten in Australia, I traveled to Thailand. I was 20 years old. I was, hitting the backpack lifestyle, and the medication to prevent malaria at the time was I was given doxycycline, which is an antibiotic, once a day. And it turns out that doxycycline is the treatment for acute Lyme, except when it's acute Lyme, you take it twice a day. So it's like I was half treated for Lyme, but not completely treated. And so the infection was able to go dormant in my system. Also, I was 20 years old, so my immune system was pretty strong at the time. But the illness was still kind of developing under the surface for all of these years. And that's a lot of the people that I talk to who've been sick for a long time, or they've had these weird symptoms for which they've been consulting doctors after doctors. They do tests, they don't find much stuff. They try different treatments, nothing works really well. And when we start connecting the dots, they're like, oh my gosh, yes, I remember 10 years ago, I had this rash on my arm. Oh my gosh, could it have been Lyme all this time? Right? So right now, the guidelines are changing, and the guidelines are different in the US than they are in Canada, but they are changing with what to do if somebody gets bit by a tick. Right now in Canada, at least in Quebec, where I've practiced as a nurse practitioner, the guideline is that if the tick has been attached on you for more than 24 hours, you should seek for prophylaxis. So you should seek for a treatment. And there are studies that are showing that the tick can transmit pathogens within 10 minutes of being attached. So what I've been suggesting to people is to just go for, just consult when you have a tick. I'll show you how to remove it. Certain provinces still test for the tick. I'm not sure in the US what they do, but keep the tick so that it can be analyzed to see if the tick has Borrelia or other tick-borne diseases, and go for an early treatment. In Canada, in Quebec, pharmacists have the authority to give 1 dose of antibiotics. So if if you can't see your doctor for several days, in Quebec, I don't know about the US, but in Quebec, you can go see the pharmacist and they'll give you 1 dose. It'll buy you time, basically. Okay. So yeah, I talked about the global warming. All right. So here is a map. This is the map of 2018. That's the most recent one on the CDC website of the presence of Lyme disease in the US. So we see that the Northeast and the, kind of the Great Lake section is greatly affected, all the way down to Florida, and then a little bit everywhere in each state. Keep in mind, and we see that there is some presence in Alaska. Hawaii does not have Lyme yet, and hopefully it will never get it. I know some Lyme survivors who have decided to move to Hawaii so that their children would, not get it, and that was just a decision based on their experience of having it. So keep in mind that it's not because Lyme have not been found in a certain area that ticks are not infected. Oftentimes I hear people say, well, I went to see my doctors and they said, well, there's no Lyme in our state, or there's no Lyme in our province or in our region. Let's keep that with a grain of salt, because it's not because ticks infected have not been found yet that there are none there. So the ticks are really, when you think about it, they're really the dirty needle of nature. Because before they bite a human, They might have bitten a bird, a mouse, a deer. So they have the capacity to gain or to acquire multiple pathogens, bacteria, viruses, parasites, and then that's how they transmit so many pathogens when they bite, a human. So it's literally, we're talking about vaccination a lot these days. So it's literally as if we were vaccinating everybody with the same needle. So think about a tick like that. It's a dirty needle of nature. In terms of number of cases, for quite some time, the CDC was reporting that in the US, there was about 300,000 new cases per year. And there's a recent study that has been estimating now, based on insurance reports, that it's more likely to be closer to 475,000 new cases per year in the US. In Canada, the latest statistic that I found for 2019 was 2,700 cases. So when I'm thinking about this, okay, so let's say Canada, nearly 3,000 cases a year, the US over 300,000 cases a year. That means the US has 1,000 more cases a year than Canada, but its population is not 1,000 times more. We're 30 million, but a little over 30 million in Canada, is over 300 million in the US. So the maths don't fit. So either in Canada we have really strong borders where the ticks are not coming in, or it's a testing issue in Canada that people, cases are underreported, which is kind of my hypothesis. So this is a map of Quebec. So this is really the southern part of Quebec. In orange is the high prevalence, highly endemic region. The yellow is moderate risk. So if I kind of go back between the two maps, it makes sense that it's all of these border regions between the US and Canada, and Quebec being kind of above here, above. So this is all Quebec here, okay? So Lyme, how do you recognize Lyme in the acute phase? Well, I often tell people, okay, if you've seen a tick, you develop the bullseye rash, which is the typical, kind of target-like rash, the redness. That's a textbook rash. And let's say you've consulted, you went to see a doctor and you got a treatment for the appropriate amount of time. Go buy yourself a lottery ticket because you're really lucky. More realistically here, this rash, the target-like rash, not everybody gets it. It's about 50 to 70% of people who will get the rash. So there's a 50 to 30 to 50% of people who won't get the rash, or they're going to get a rash, but it's not, kind of clear. The rash can get up to 12-inch or 30 centimeter. And not everybody sees the tick, because ticks are very good at going into places where you don't see them. They're very small. They inject a little anesthesia, so you don't feel when they bite you, and you don't feel when they're on you. And they can stay attached for their meal for up to 5 days. Okay, so in the acute phase, if somebody has the bullseye rash, this is diagnostic of Lyme. You don't even need a blood test. You need a treatment. The current guidelines for treatment are different everywhere that I look. Back home in Canada, the treatments, the guidelines say 14 days of antibiotics. The first line treatment is doxycycline, or for children under 8, it's an antibiotics like amoxicillin. But in the studies, the research has shown that for people, even people who are caught in the acute phase, so within the first 30 days, even with a course of antibiotics of 28 days, the rate of cure or eradication of the pathogens are between 70 and 84%. So in the acute phase, I always suggest to people to ask for a longer course of treatment for at least 4 weeks, 28 days, just to give yourself the odds to of having a good chance of eradicating it. In the acute phase, the symptoms, they look a little bit like the flu, like fever, chills, headache, fatigue, muscle and joint pain, and kind of achiness. You can have some swollen lymph nodes. I often tell people to be aware of the summer flu. So most of the rates of transmission of Lyme are in the spring and in the fall. But some people might acquire Lyme and not develop the symptoms immediately. Sometimes it can take some weeks. So I tell people, when we're coming out of influenza season and it's the summer, and then you feel like you have the flu, like it's a summer flu, influenza normally doesn't circulate much during the summertime. Well, now we have COVID, but that's just different. Just be aware of that summer flu, okay? Last year, a good friend of mine, she flies paragliders and I fly hang glider, and our mountain back home is in a region that unfortunately is very endemic. She called me and she said, hey, I was hiking in the mountain with my paraglider and I came home and I had this rash on this kind of little redness on my thigh, and been having this fever and feeling a little bit kind of chill. And anyway, she was describing it to me and I said, you need to go, see a doctor as soon as possible. And if you can get a dose from the pharmacist like tonight, please go do that. And she was unsure. She was like, yeah, I'm not sure. I've been more tired. I was like, go see the doctor. Anyways, it turns out it was Lyme, and she got 28 days of treatment. So that was last summer. And this past winter, her and I were cross-country skiing together. And I asked her, I said, have you fully recovered? Do you have any vestige symptoms? She says, oh, I'm good. Like I recovered completely. And then she looked at me and she said, you know what, Catherine? She says, thank God you had Lyme disease. And I was like, what? She said, not that I wanted you to suffer, but she says, because when you were sick, you were telling us about it. We're a small flying community back home. And she says, you were spreading that information. And because you talked to me about it, my mind was it was quick to go to that hypothesis when I was sick, And I was like, oh, yes. Hence the importance of being able to recognize these things really quickly. In the acute phase, not everybody, like I said, will have the rash, but beware of these kind of symptoms. Now we got COVID, so if you feel the summer flu, then you can go do a double whammy, get tested for COVID and Lyme disease. Just think about it and suggest it to your doctors. All right, how do we prevent this? So, prevention is the best cure. So we want to prevent the ticks from being able to not only attach to your skin, but to bite your skin, okay? Let me just show you the different sizes, and the ticks are in their different stages. So this is the larva, and it's like a millimeter. It's like a dot at the end of a sentence, okay? The larva, most times the larva is so small, they can't travel very far. So their first meal is going to be on a mouse or like a smaller mammal in the woods. But if a larva was to bite you, most likely the larva doesn't contain the bacteria yet because you're their first meal. So for each stage of their growth, the ticks need a blood meal. So the larva then goes into the nymph, and already the nymph is very, very small, and it can already transmit the Lyme disease. And then this is the adult male. You'll notice that its abdomen is kind of like a hard pumpkin seed, and this is the adult female, and you'll notice that its abdomen has this kind of supple, like flexible bursa, and this is the one that, as the female will drink the blood, its abdomen will reach much bigger sizes, and then she's the one who needs the biggest blood meal in order to lay hundreds of thousands of eggs, and the male just dies after mating with the female. Some people have done a test of weighing a tick before a female tick, before and after a meal, And after a meal, the tick was 624 times heavier than before the meal. So for a human being, it's almost like you were a human being would go from 60 kilograms to 37 tons. So that's how much blood in tick size that the tick, ingests in order to give birth to um, all of these eggs. And when the tick, so you see their roster, like their kind of mandibles there. This is the part that they inject under your skin, and so the tick will suck your blood. And in order to make space in her own abdomen, the tick will kind of regurgitate the content of its stomach. And it's in the content of its stomach that you find the Borrelia bacteria, the viruses, the parasites. And so by regurgitating that under your skin, it also breaks down the capillaries under your skin. And so that there's more blood that is coming to be available for the tick. So it's a series of sucking blood and regurgitating the stomach content. I know it's disgusting, but that's what they do. So that's why we want to prevent their bite. The ticks, they don't fall off of trees. They mainly stay in tall grass on the ground. They love when there's a pile of branches and dead leaves in your yard or things like that. They love hanging out in those piles of stuff. Climbing onto a blade of grass or onto a branch, and they're just like this, ready for any furry, warm blood mammal or a human or even a reptile to pass by, and they just, latch on to them. So when you go walk in the woods, of course, you want to stay on the path and avoid the high grass. Here's my stepwise approach when I go into nature, because I'm a nature fan, and it just sucks to think about not going into nature. So this is what I use. I use a tick repeller with DEET. It can be Watkins. DEET is found in most, outdoor sports stores, pharmacies, Walmart. You can find DEET. You want at least 30% DEET for tick repelling. So what I do, because DEET is so toxic, I don't want to put it on my skin. So I put it on the, let's say I'm wearing pants. I'm putting it at the bottom, of my pants and on my shoes and on my socks. And if I wear a long sleeve, then I'll put it at the kind of the border between my sleeve and my hands. Some sports clothes will get damaged by DEET, so try it on a small space beforehand. So that's where I put the DEET. And then I use a product called Ecaridine, 20%, which is almost as effective as DEET, but not nearly as toxic. It can be a spray or a lotion. My husband found some here in the States. I think he found it at Walmart, and it was called Picaridine. But the ingredient is Ecaridine 20%. So because this one is less toxic, what I do is I put it on my arms, because summertime, I like to wear short sleeve. And so I put it on my arms, and if I'm wearing shorts or capris, I put it on my legs, on the skin, and I'm not afraid of the toxicity. And then in the most sensitive areas of the body, which is where, unfortunately, ticks like to hide, like on your neck or behind or in your ears or in your armpits or groin or in your navel or at the base of your back or behind your knees, places where the skin is sensitive and the skin is thin. So it's a place of high absorption. I use essential oils. There's a great company I think they're in New Hampshire or in Vermont. It's called Yaya Organics. And it's two lively ladies who started this company because they wanted to protect themselves and their kids. They live in the Northeast of the US, and they didn't want to put toxic, DEET and other stuff on their kids. So they started this company called Yaya Organics, where you can order tick repellent. And also they have they call it mosquito ban, and it works really well. It's made with essential oils, and they've done some some studies with these essential oils, and they were saying the rate of protection is quite high. It's not as high as DEET, but it's really quite high. So what I do is I take these essential oils. It's a spray. So I spray it literally in my ears, behind my neck. I spray it in my armpit and groin, and at the back of my kind of where the back meets the bottom. Because these are sensitive skin area that the ticks like to latch on. And touch wood, with this cocktail, I have not been bitten by a tick ever again, in 5 years that I've been aware of Lyme disease. So this has been working really well. If you would like to have a list of these products and things like that, I'm happy to send that by email. I've created a document about these different products. It's recommended to wear long, clear colored clothes, wide clear, because if you have a white shirt, it's easier to see a tick crawl on it than if it's a dark colored one. And some closed shoes, a hat. And then I was laughing with my my flying community back home, because I was telling them, all right, we're going to start this new fashion. When you're going to walk in the woods, going to launch with your paraglider, you're going to put your shirt in your pants and your pants in your sock. And we're going to all be this fashionable people protecting ourselves from tick bites. But with all that being said, wearing long clothes, just tuck them in your pants and in your socks. When you come back from the outdoors, of course, examine your body, and especially in the places where you can't see, have somebody examine your body, examine your equipment. And if you brought pets with you, just examining your pets really well when you come back from the outdoors. It's recommended to put your clothes in the dryer for 6 minutes to kind of, roast the ticks, or just simply wash them in hot water and decide if you want to put them in the dryer or not, but the hot water should deal with them. I have a lot of clothes that I don't put in the dryer, so I would just wash them. And then if you have a yard behind, or if you go to places where there's nature and then there's dead leaves and branches and things like that, just make sure to clean that out, because it's a great place where ticks love to hang out. How to remove a tick? Okay, so there's many people saying many things, and these are the 2 ways to remove a tick that I found has the most consensus on it. When the tick bites, so it's got its kind of roster in your skin, it's got some kind of needles so if you try to pull it, your skin will come with it because it's really well attached. So I find that one of the ways that work the best is using a tick remover. You can find that at veterinarians or pet shops sell these kind of things. It looks like something you would use on the other side of a hammer to remove a nail, except you don't remove it like a nail. You twist it counterclockwise. You twist it, and then the tick will naturally unlatch, because by twisting it under the skin where the needles are kind of up, by twisting it, the needles will kind of align in the direction that you're twisting, and then it'll remove the entire tick. If you don't have that, you can take a pair of tweezers that are fine tipped. You don't want the big fat kind of eyebrow tweezers, because with the big fat ones, there's a risk that you would press on the abdomen, and either the content of the stomach would, the tick would regurgitate that into your skin, or the head could break. Okay, so you want to have these thin head tweezers go as close as you can to the head and just kind of pull straight up. Some people have been trying all kinds of things, including, bringing like a match or a cigarette close to the abdomen, and the tick kind of, feeling the burn will withdraw itself. But the problem with that is that it's going to stress the tick, and on its way out, there's a greater chance of its regurgitating the content of its stomach into the skin. Same thing with Vaseline, Uh, of all the techniques, these are the two that I found in the guidelines that have the most agreement on. Okay, so once the tick has been removed, you can keep it in a container, you can keep it in the fridge. And if you can get it analyzed, take it to a local lab or to your doctor to see if the tick was carrying some tick-borne illnesses. You clean the skin afterwards, disinfect it. If you don't have a little alcohol swab or, some disinfectant, just soap and water, really, really good. And keep the date and the place where you were stung. And you can even circle the bite. So this is if you've seen the tick, so that you can see if there's some redness that develops there. Nowadays with Lyme, we used to say, oh, only consult the doctor if you develop symptoms of the acute phase. Nowadays, I don't think this is in the guidelines, but when my people are calling me because they know I have this expertise, they're like, I had a tick, what do I do? I tell them just go consult. Don't hesitate. It's too prevalent, and the consequences of not detecting it on time they're too big that you should be consulting medical practitioner and get some prophylaxis treatment if you can. If you're also in a highly endemic region, you can check with your local health authorities and see what their guidelines are. Okay. Is there any questions so far? Or is everything, I know I'm covering a lot of stuff, but if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat and I will be happy to answer that. If not, I will just keep going. Okay. All right. With Lyme disease, there are three main challenges that I had to face and that everybody who's been affected closely or even by far by Lyme disease have been facing. First challenge is, why is the diagnosis so difficult to get in phase 2 and 3? Second one is, how does Lyme disease compares to a marathon? And third challenge is where to start and persevere during this healing journey. So we're going to solve this mystery now. The first challenge is with the diagnosis. The problem is Lyme is the greatest imitator. Nobody presents with the same story and the same clinical picture. In phase 2 and 3, I'm talking about. In phase 1, in the acute phase, it's pretty typical to have, if you're going to have the typical symptoms, it's going to be easy to recognize for your practitioner. But for somebody who's been over 30 days of the bite and are starting to develop signs and symptoms of the disseminated phases, and next slide, I'll show you what it is, nobody present with the same story and clinical picture. And here's why. When the bacteria are starting to spread into the body, it'll go in a place where, in the system where a weakness already exists. For example, myself, I've had irritable bowel syndrome since I was 15 years old. So guess where the first symptoms manifested themselves? In my digestion. At first, I was like, whoa, what's going on? Do I have candida? Do I have, whoa, I mean, if I had consulted my doctor back then, they would have never thought about Lyme disease, for a good reason, because I had belly pains and bloating and things like that. And so somebody, let's say, have had a car accident some years ago, and let's say they've had a whiplash in their neck, and they've kept a sensitivity, in their neck, and maybe a certain weakness in there. Well, guess where Lyme is going to go first? It's going to first go give them neck pain and neck symptoms, which, neck pain and rigidity is one of the cardinal or classical signs of Lyme. But for that person in particular, this is going to be the first symptom. And so the challenge with the diagnosis is that it requires for the practitioner to look at the whole clinical picture. Oftentimes, the person will have signs and symptoms in many different systems. And, back home in Quebec, where practitioners are on such a tight schedule, And this is, I'm not judging the system. I just know how it is because I've worked in it. When the patient presents with, multiple problems, a practitioner will say one problem. I cannot deal with all of these problems. So the patient doesn't have a chance to expose the whole clinical picture where the practitioner would then go, oh, this looks like Lyme disease. Okay. So when we're kind of too focused on one system and one particular problem, and there's a tunnel vision, the person, if they're having Lyme disease, it's going to go unnoticed for a longer time, and then the diagnosis is going to take a longer time to make until somebody is kind of seeing the global picture. Does that make sense? Yeah, and it's unfortunate. I talked to you about the ELISA and the Western blot tests, which are not super reliable in the sense that they miss a lot of the cases. And I told you why, that it requires an almost intact immune system to reach that threshold of positivity on the ELISA test. And for somebody who's been in the phase 2 and phase 3 for a long time, their immune system is just unable to mount this enough of antibody response to reach that threshold of positivity. I've seen a lot of practitioner, and this is what I suggest people who've been sick for a long time, wait until they're 3 months into a treatment, an appropriate treatment for Lyme, before they test. And then, let's say they tested in the beginning, it was negative for Lyme. They did 3 months of treatment, and then they test after 3 months, and now they're positive. Why? Because the immune system has had some help and now is getting stronger and is able to mount enough antibody to react to the test. Okay. The challenge with the diagnosis is also that international tests are not always recognized. A lot of people in Canada will reach out for tests that are done in the US or in Germany or in Europe. Same thing in the US, they'll reach out for tests in different countries, and some practitioners are not comfortable interpreting and relying on a test that they don't know the lab and it's in a foreign country, so they might dismiss the test. And also, what I found out personally when I was sick, and it's still the case, is that there is currently limited medical knowledge for the phase 2 and 3 of Lyme disease. Like I said, it requires a practitioner to see the thing in a global picture. And the way medicine is practiced in sections, with specialties, it's difficult to, and with time schedule to see the global picture. Like I said earlier, fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, although now they are recognized as official diagnoses, the etiology or the source of them is still unknown. And there are medical hypotheses that are saying that perhaps fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome are chronic Lyme that is simply untreated. So when somebody has been sick for a while and then they come to me and they're telling me, I've gone to 15 different doctors, I've been to specialists, I've done so many tests, I've tried, not much is coming out on the test. I've tried so many treatments and not much is working, and my health continues to deteriorate. And now they're starting to tell me it's in my head, and practitioners want to prescribe antidepressants to me. I'm like, okay, this is the typical picture of somebody who's been undetected and they're in the phase 3 of Lyme. This is a clinical picture of Lyme. And I'll show you more specifically what that looks like. So Lyme disease, the way it is taught in the medical books is that, Lyme is caused by this one bacteria called Borrelia burgdorferi mainly. And it presents like this in the acute phase. And that's what I learned when I was learning pathophysiology and in nurse practitioner classes. And that's what is being taught in the medical field. What we know from Lyme experts is that it's a cluster of infections. Lyme comes with co-infections, and the 3 most common ones are Babesia and Bartonella and Anaplasma. So each one of them cause different kinds of symptoms. And it's with the symptoms that it is giving the person and the practitioner a clue on what the immune system is working on, because the symptoms are caused by the activity of the immune system trying to fight that pathogen. Okay. So If we look at Borrelia, this is the spirochete in its active form. I'll show you later how it mutates form. But Borrelia is a cousin of syphilis. Syphilis is also a spirochete, and it's also transmitted by blood and sexually. With Borrelia, there are some hypotheses and studies. One study that says it could be transmitted sexually, but it's not really clear. But definitely by blood, and ticks are blood suckers, so they will transmit it that way. And also there's a transmission from mother to fetus that we know for Borrelia. So Borrelia will cause fatigue for sure. Borrelia is also responsible for this kind of diffuse muscle pain that is similar to fibromyalgia. It will also cause some joint pain similar to arthritis. It brings a difficulty concentrating. People will complain of brain fog. It will cause some weakness. Like when I was sick and I was trying to just dry my hair and my arm just wouldn't hold the hair blower. That's how weak I was. It can cause some tremors, either outside, like visible, or sometimes a person will say, I feel like I'm shaking inside, like an internal tremor. So it's not a visible tremor. It can cause some muscle spasms, dizziness, some numbness, pins and needles, a lack of coordination and balance, can cause some vision disturbances, some floaters. For me, it was the floaters, yes, and the 2D vision. I lost the 3D vision. So that's mainly the signs and symptoms of Borrelia, which when you look at this, it's like, well, it's kind of non-specific. I agree. So here's the key. It's to not kind of pick one or two out of these and say, oh, I have Lyme disease. No, it's to see it in its global picture and see that when there's multiple signs and symptoms in these multiple categories, you're more thinking about that. Babesia is a protozoa, so it's a parasite, and it's a parasite of red blood cells. It is a close cousin of malaria, which is why when I got to Thailand in 2000, the prophylaxis, the prevention for malaria was doxycycline. It is effective for Babesia also. But Babesia will also require an anti-parasite to treat it fully. Babesia brings difficulty concentrating. So some of the cardinal signs, so classical signs of Babesia is that searching for words. When I was saying a pen, that searching for words is very much Babesia. Also, a classical sign of Babesia is this air hunger. It's like people are like, I can't take a deep breath. This air hunger. They'll feel a shortness of breath. Some of them will even go to the ER because they feel like they're suffocating, and yet their oxygen saturation is normal. And they're like, why do I feel like I'm suffocating and my oxygen saturation is normal? Babesia. It can also cause rib pain. Another classical sign of Babesia is this kind of thermostat imbalance. You can't regulate your temperature. So sometimes we'll have fever and intermittent sweats or even hot flashes, which are not menopause caused, or going to like feeling frozen and deep chills, even if the outside temperature is really warm. So Babesia causes this kind of thermostat imbalance. Another cardinal sign of Babesia is this POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardic syndrome, or it's like palpitations, either from just changing position, and then you have palpitations. It's normal when you go from like a sitting to a standing position that your heart rate accelerates a little bit just to kind of bring the blood around, but it's not normal for it to last very long. So with Babesia, I remember being at rest. I was in my bed, either for a nap or I was waking up in the morning, and all of a sudden this thing would start, like this tachycardia, this heart rate would accelerate over 100. And I'm like, I'm not doing anything. It's weird. So Babesia will cause a lot of these cardiac symptoms. Also will cause some general malaise, like feeling just malaise, weak. Babesia is responsible for a lot of the insomnia that is met in Lyme disease. I'm tired as hell, but I can't sleep. This is something that I hear a lot. Babesia is oftentimes the culprit for that. Babesia will cause weird headaches. So headaches that are moving. Sometimes people describe like it's almost like there's a bug crawling behind my eyes. It can cause a state of depression and anxiety with some fear. It's like a fear dominant thing. So for me as a hang glider pilot, I don't experience, I mean, I do experience fear, but I know how to master it. When I was sick, I was having these irrational fears of like, I don't even remember, but it was just like not me to be afraid like that. Babesia brings some déjà vu. So you're like, oh, I've seen this before. A lot of these déjà vu. Can also bring tinnitus, ringing in the ear, loss of appetite, nausea, vomiting, and then some cold and painful numb extremities, either the hands or the feet. I had a lot of that. It was really annoying. Almost Raynaud-like, like people who have Raynaud's syndrome, where all of a sudden they'll go like white hand, they're cold. It's like a circulatory thing. The circulation shuts down, and Raynaud, they can pass out. So almost like this, but without the whitening of the extremities with Babesia. Bartonella is a bacteria. It's a pathogen that can cause what's called cat scratch disease. So it can be transmitted by cats when they scratch you. Basically, that's how the illness is got its name. But it can also be transmitted by ticks. So the classical signs of Bartonella is the migrating joint and muscle pain. One day I'm hurting here, the other day I'm hurting there, the other day is my knee. Oh my gosh, this pain is killing me one day is what I'm hearing people say. It's killing me one day, and the next day it's gone. So this migratory pain is classical of Bartonella. Pain under your feet. It can cause some stretch marks on the skin because Bartonella likes to cause inflammation in the blood vessel, in the capillaries. So I'll show you the stretch marks, what it looks like later. It can cause headaches, fatigue, a lot of neck pain and stiffness, fever, conjunctivitis. So the white of your eye becomes red, almost like if you had allergies. It can cause some swollen lymph nodes. So let's say you have a bump and you're like, whoa, what is this? It can cause some anxiety, some panic, and some irritability. Bartonella is also known to cause some bladder problems. So urinary frequency. I had a client that I coached, and she was going to the bathroom like 16 times a day in her wakeful hours. And she was like, she couldn't go to the store anymore because she was like, I can't even be 10 minutes in the car and I need the bathroom, So after she treated Bartonella appropriately, she went from going 16 times a day to like 7. So it was such a liberation for her to be able to go back to, to drive, half an hour to go see people, in her family or go to the store. That was pre-COVID. So she could still do that. Anyway, so Bartonella, what it does, it goes into the bladder wall and it irritates it. It causes what's called an interstitial cystitis. So the person might have symptoms like they have a urinary tract infection. You go pee often and it kind of burns, but internally you test their pee and their pee is not infected. Their urine is not infected, but they go pee a lot, often, small quantities, and they have pain, in their lower abdomen. So that's a classical sign of Bartonella. Bartonella also causes sore throat that is intermittent. Can also cause like gastric inflammation, heartburn, nausea, reflux, and decrease your appetite. So again, I have this document. You will not find this document or this table in any medical textbook yet, or I haven't found any. This came from just doing research and pulling stuff from everywhere. Lyme experts would say, oh, with Babesia, you have this and then that, but nobody was putting it together. And then with my own brain that was searching for its words, but yet needed to organize, I said, wait a minute, I need to put this together. So with this clinical picture, it's my hope that it's making it easier for people and eventually practitioners to see the global picture of Lyme. Okay. One of the great ways to increase the likelihood of finding the diagnosis is to answer the questionnaire from Dr. Horowitz. I have it later in a slide, I'll show it to you. But that questionnaire has been validated by 2 universities, one in Europe, one in the US, as being more valid than, more predictable than blood tests to predict that the person is dealing with Lyme disease. So with that test, and then the clinical signs and symptoms, my goal is to make it easier for people and practitioners to recognize the illness quicker. Okay. So I can send you this document also. I have it available. Challenge number 2 is the Lyme marathon. When the body is under attack for such extended periods of time, the immune system is just kind of running constantly on high drive for 24/7. The immune system is the system in your body that requires the most energy. That's why when you get the flu or you get sick, you get tired, because your body is mobilizing all of its energy into the immune system to fight off the infections. You know, it's almost like in the house, the utility that draws in the most power is the dryer, right? Like when you start your dryer, you almost see like at my house, I see the lights go a little bit because it's such a demand on the electric power. So your immune system is like the dryer in your house, asking for a lot of energy. It's the most energy demanding system. So Lyme is like a marathon because it's a medical marathon for diagnosis and for the treatment. It's also a marathon because it's a complex chronic infection cluster. It'll cause immune imbalance and dysfunction. So the immune system is in like high res, trying to extinguish fires everywhere, and it just gets dysregulated. Sometimes it gets hyperactive in an area and hypoactive in another area. So it just gets really dysregulated. It just doesn't know where to give thoughts because it's in such a high drive. There's a cardiac dysfunction. The cardiac rhythm gets imbalanced. There's neurological dysfunction. So Borrelia likes to hide in 3 different systems. It really, really likes the neurological system, the central nervous system. That's why it gives a lot of nervous system symptoms, like headaches and dizziness and numbness and pins and needles and lack of coordination. It loves the gastrointestinal system. It likes to attach to its wall, create biofilms in there, and damage the intestine there. So it causes digestive issues. And also it likes to hide in the vascular bed. So on the blood vessels, it likes to create inflammation and hides right there. So it'll cause circulatory dysfunction. Eventually also, in order to sustain the war that the immune system is fighting, the hormonal system is getting tired also. Your thyroid, the cortisol, which is produced by, I don't want to, go too deep into anatomy, but you got 2 kidneys and there's a little hat on top of the kidneys, which is the adrenals, and the adrenals secrete the cortisol, the adrenaline, and the noradrenaline. And at first, when the war is starting, the adrenals are like, yeah, pumping all of this power and this juice onto the battlefield, but eventually they get tired, they get exhausted, and so they need to be supported. Also, hormonal dysfunction in the reproductive years. For me, when I was sick, I would have, my periods every 70 days, which kind of makes sense because when the body is under attack, the last thing it wants to do is reproduce itself, right? So, but the hormones get shifted and dysfunctional. You also get muscle and joint dysfunction because the microorganisms, they like to hide in the tissues. It's in fact its goal to hide from the immune system so that it can go into your tissues, reproduce in peace, and then come out into the bloodstream to be transmitted to another host when it's time to to, travel again. Lyme is a very smart microorganism, and there's a reason for that. It's been around. We have evidence that it's been around for at least 5,000 years because one of the mummy that was found, I forget what her name is. She's 5,000 years old, or he 5,000 years old, and the Borrelia, the bacteria, was found in his blood, but that's not what killed it. What killed it was a machete on the head. So the benefit of having smart microorganisms is they are smart enough to know that they must not kill their host. Like Ebola has not been around for a long time enough to understand that it needs to not kill its host, because when you kill the host so quickly, it reduces the pathogen's chance of being transmitted. So intelligent pathogens are not killing the host because they want to give themselves the greater chance of being transmitted, but they'll weaken the host quite a bit, okay? Lyme also causes mitochondrial dysfunction, and almost every chronic illness causes mitochondrial dysfunction. Quick thing, I love mitochondria. Each cell in your body has these little mitochondria. They look like little jelly beans, and they are the energy producing plant of your cells. So let's say you're contracting your muscle, and you need energy for the muscle to contract itself. You need ATP, and it's the mitochondria that are producing that energy. So when there's so much war and infection and inflammation, the mitochondria get damaged. So they're not able to produce that as much energy as they would normally. And so that weakness and that fatigue happens concurrently. So it's much more than just a regular infection, okay? The Lyme Marathon is also Lyme for the treatment. Lyme goes everywhere into all the systems, and it has to be treated in all of their systems, okay? I don't know if you can see here, but on this picture, there's 4 different forms of the Borrelia spirochete, which makes it tricky to treat all different forms because not every treatment, will affect each form. So the first form is the spirochete, the corkscrew, and then the spirochete doesn't stay very long in the bloodstream because it wants to hide. So it'll either form some cysts, and to isolate themselves from the immune system. It'll form what's called a round body, which is a round body is kind of a no membrane kind of bleb thing that can just crawl into the tissues. In fact, it's called it's thought that spontaneous pneumothorax, the lung that collapses, can be caused by blebs like this. And I believe that I had a spontaneous pneumothorax when I became sick with Lyme because of these things. The other form is biofilms. And so biofilms is just a bunch of microorganisms. They come together in a cluster. They literally build a fortress around them so that the immune system, immune cells are going into the bloodstream and they don't see the pathogens because they're hiding in their fortress. And that's just a place to hide. And that's what is mostly responsible for persisting, what's called the persisters, persisting Lyme disease. Here is Babesia. This is a picture under microscope of the red blood cells, and everywhere you see purple dots right there, this is the Babesia parasite hiding into that red blood cell. So what happens when that red blood cell is being infected with the parasite, it just dies, it just commits suicide. No one wants to live with the parasite inside of them. So it reduces the amount of red blood cells available for oxygen transport. This is Bartonella. You see like the skin stretch marks? This is the classical sign of Bartonella. And it can occur, this is the bottom of the lower back, but it can occur on the thighs, the lower belly. Some people have them sometimes on their, arms, but it's mostly around the trunk. So the marathon for treatment is you have to address all forms of Lyme, of Borrelia, plus all the co-infections, plus support all of the systems that are getting tired of being at war. So you have to address all 5 pillars. I've been helping people with Lyme for 4 years. And one of my former clients compared the protocol that I've been teaching her with the protocol that's been done at a clinic in Germany. So somebody was, being treated in Germany, and this person was telling me, she says, Catherine, the protocol you've built is more complete than the protocol they have in Germany. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. So I've had many people over the years come to me, and when they implement the complete 5 pillars of the protocol, I've had people who were sick for years. I had a 63-year-old gentleman who was sick for like 2 years. He was having such intense pain and air hunger, couldn't breathe, rib pains, digestive issues. He was mixing his words like you wouldn't believe. It was hard to understand. And within 3 weeks, he stopped having this rib pain and this air hunger. And within 5 weeks, he regained so much energy, he didn't know what to do with himself. And his words came back normal within the sentence. Within 7 weeks, he had no more pain and he was able to stop his narcotics. He was taking narcotics for pain. And within 10 weeks, he was feeling like he had resuscitated. And he was like, Catherine, he says, how come no doctor was able to give me something like you did? And I said, well, it's the knowledge is not there yet in the medical field. So where to start is the challenge number 3: education, education, education. So thank you for being here and getting all of this information, because you never know who is going to need all of that information. Like I talked to you earlier about the questionnaire from Dr. Horowitz. He's a Lyme specialist who practices in New Jersey. I forget where, and he trained also in Belgium. So when you Google Dr. Horowitz Lyme questionnaire, you have multiple sites that have it. It's a score, and you can answer that score. You can fill it in, and if you have a score above 46, there's a high probability that it is Lyme disease. And this questionnaire has been validated, like I said, in different universities, and it takes in consideration all of the overlapping symptoms. It's really well made. Where to start? Well, if you know somebody, or you are affected by Lyme, or maybe you think it is, take charge of your healing path and become your own expert. I had the privilege of being a healthcare practitioner professional when I was sick. So when my doctor was telling me it's all about stress, I didn't let myself be impressed with that, because I just knew, and we were colleagues. So, but unfortunately, I see a lot of people, and not judging, just compassion towards people who are relying on their doctors, and they're you know doing what they're being told. But when things are not working, it's time for you to take your own healing into your own hands. What's required? So an overview of a path to recovery from Lyme. You need 5 pillars for a successful treatment. The antimicrobials, I chose to use medicinal plants because I knew that I didn't want to put antibiotics in my gut. I already had gut problems. I didn't want to kill my microbiome and all the good gut bacteria that constitute 80% of the immune system. Some people will require antibiotics. They can take both at the same time, medical antibiotics and medicinal plants. It works really well. But the key is to have the right antimicrobials that cover for all forms of Borrelia and Babesia and Bartonella and all the co-infections. I go into much detail over this in the online course that I've built, and it is available for somebody who would want to just have total access to the whole protocol for themselves or somebody else. Second pillar, daily detox. When we start taking in some antimicrobials and the bugs are starting to die, it's overwhelming for the normal detoxification pathways of the body. So we have to help it. Oftentimes I give this analogy. Let's say you have this battlefield, the immune system is battling the bad guys, but some good guys are dying too. So you have to have like these, the guys coming in with the wheelbarrows to take away the dead bodies, and then some guys have to wrap the dead bodies into the trash and then trash bags, and then the garbage truck has to pass by to pick up the trash bag. So each phase of detox is important, in the body. And so the protocol addresses all phases. The third pillar is to have something in place that helps the immune system to regulate and to be supported. What do I mean by regulate? It's like where it's been like super active, some supplements will go to the immune system and say, just chill out a little bit here. We need your help here because you've been hypoactive. So it's something that modulates the immune system, okay? The fourth pillar is reduction of inflammatory cytokine cascade. So when the immune system is going crazy, it is shooting some inflammatory mediators. It's almost like, if you take the analogy of war, like throwing napalm, trying to kill everything, but it's killing the good guys too. And it's hot and create damage just from the inflammation itself. So you want something to just calm down the inflammation. And the fifth pillar is to support the adrenals and the mitochondria, who are the key elements to sustain energy in the fight for, to sustain the immune system, to fight the infection and bring the body back to balance. So all of these 5 pillars are addressed using supplements, diet, and a lot of changes in the mindset. So, and here's where coaching is interesting. So people with Lyme have to do kind of radical changes in their habits, and it starts with diet. So proper clean nutrition. In the studies, the diets that have the best results for Lyme disease are the paleo diet and the ketogenic diet. But mainly it's those ones where you have no gluten, no dairy, and as little sugar as possible. Sleep. Oh my gosh, sleep is so important because that's where you regenerate, your energy, but that's also when the immune system can be active and continue fighting the infections. So adequate sleep, cannot stress this enough, how important it is. Toxin removal. We live in a toxic environment, and we know this from the chemicals that are found in the food, in the water, in the air. So even if we can't make it perfect, to remove the toxins by simply, starting to buy organic food, replacing toxic household products with products that are environmentally friendly, that contain no toxins. Putting water filter systems in your house, but also removing heavy metals and molds, which is something we address in the protocol, because heavy metals have a tendency to live into the bacteria, into the parasites and bacteria, and strengthen them. So you want a double whammy to get rid of both. Also, the electromagnetic fields, so we got cell phone, Wi-Fi, towers, we are surrounded by electromagnetic fields. What happens with the pathogens, so the bacteria, the viruses, the parasites, when they're in presence of EMFs, they perceive that as a threat. And so they start to reproduce quicker and they become more aggressive. So this is good for everybody to reduce their exposure to EMFs, but even more so for someone who's been sick with Lyme or fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome, to turn off the Wi-Fi at night, or even better is to have direct connection cable with the computer. And when you're not using the cell phone, put it in airplane mode and turn it off. Why in airplane mode is because even if you turn it off, if it's not in airplane mode, it's still searching for some network, so that when you turn it back on, it will be ready soon. Okay. Some people are living in apartment, in cities and apartment where there's a lot of Wi-Fi. I know for myself, when I go in a hotel and I see my phone is picking up like 20 Wi-Fi networks, I'm like, oh, getting jazzed here. So some people will buy what's called a it's an EMF blocking net to sleep under. It literally creates a Faraday cage, and you can find that on the internet. And this has been found to be very helpful for some people with Lyme or chronic illnesses. They have a more restful sleep. You can also sleep on grounding sheets, earthing sheets. So you can plug them in the ground of the outlet. I've been sleeping on these sheets for 5 or 6 years now, and it really makes a difference. The sleep is just more rejuvenating, and I wake up more recharged in the morning. Exercise when somebody is sick with Lyme, not too much, but it's important to keep exercising. The cue is that if the person wakes up the next day and is more tired, they've done too much the day before. Okay, so regulating the amount of exercise is important. The other habit change that are essential, especially when someone's been sick for a long time, is mindset change. So stress management. A lot of people with Lyme who have been going to medical, to practitioners after practitioners, they're feeling unwell, they're feeling sick, and they're being told all the time, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. We can't find anything. It creates an emotional trauma. It creates an internal stress that the person doesn't even want to go see a practitioner or doesn't want to go consult, a doctor anymore. And it creates stress in the relationships of this person. So stress management is key with Lyme. A lot of people feel like their symptoms get flared up whenever they feel stressed, and I was one of them too. Also, paying attention to the language, powerful language. Have you ever heard somebody say, "Oh, my disease," or "my cancer," or "my this," right? So this pronoun of possession. Here's a problem with that. It's when we attribute a possession to something, like my illness, in the subconscious mind, because I possess this, and nobody wants to lose something they possess, there's going to be a subconscious block to not heal, because that will mean to lose something they possess. So I love talking about language and the power of our words to create our life. And oftentimes I'll tell people, I'll suggest to say, talk about the Lyme disease that is affecting your body. Make it a little bit more neutral and objective rather than identifying yourself with it. I often hear people say, "Oh, I'm a Lyme." A Lyme is basically making the Lyme your identity. This is so powerful. And I've seen this over and over and over, that people don't heal when they self-identify with the illness. The other mindset, this is, I'm kind of taking you to a deeper perspective on this. And this is what I do when I coach people with advanced stages of Lyme, or that have been sick for quite a long time, with coaching, harmonizing their inner conflicts. And I've seen this over and over and over. People have this inner conflict of, part of them wants to heal, and that's in the subconscious. Part of them wants to heal and regain their life and do things as usual. But a part of them does not want to heal, because it will mean to go back to a life that made them sick in the first place. I had a client that I coached some 3 years ago, and one day she became aware of this, and she said, "Oh, I realized that if I was to heal, I would become the maid of everybody in my household again. I'll be having to do the dishes for everybody and pick up after everybody, and I was so tired of that. Nobody was appreciative of what I was doing, and they were just walking all over me." So she realized that if she was to heal, she was going to go back to that life. So there was a part of her that didn't want to heal. How amazing that she found that out. And that together in coaching, we were able to give her tools to now be able to assert herself and set healthy boundaries, and set that up in the structure of her life, that now she could heal, knowing that she wasn't going to go back to a life that made her sick in the first place. Okay, so when we have these inner conflicts like this, it also mobilizes so much energy in the conflict that when the conflict is dissolved, all of this energy now becomes available for healing. Like I said, the immune system requires so much energy that when we have energy that is stuck in this conflict we had with this person, 10 years ago, and this stress that we feel about not being good enough, or wanting to put other people's need first, or not being able to say no, these are all places where the person is leaking their energy, that when they regain this energy, they're like, oh, wow. And it accelerates their healing. And that's what I've done. So I combined the protocol, which was research based, very powerful, with the power of coaching, neuroscience based coaching, to heal the emotions within me. And that's how I was able to heal so quickly. And that's how my clients are doing it too. Okay. So this is, like I said, a unique approach. I haven't seen anybody else do this. And I've seen amazing success with my clients who dare to jump full into a process like this. So if you know somebody who's been sick for a long time and they're ready to regain their health and their life without losing their time or money, just I would be happy to explore if we can work together, joining this protocol and the neuroscience based coaching. It's very, very powerful. And if you like this information and if you would love to go deeper and perhaps have the protocol, have access to it, I have an online course that is already recorded. It's over 10 hours, 12 hours of video, but all of the protocol is there. I talk about the ingredients and which molecule will cover Borrelia, Babesia, Bartonella, what the food will do. I give recipes, ways to detox from heavy metals and molds, and ways to manage emotional stressors and how to manage relationships. So it's a 4-module, 12-hour video, tons of information. I've had people who bought this course, even if they weren't sick, but because they knew somebody who needed that information and they were able to help them. I've had natural practitioners buy this course to help their patients some more, their massage therapists. I've had people who were sick for a long time, didn't know it was Lyme. And there was this one lady, she was walking with a walker, and she was the cousin of a friend of mine. She bought the course, she implemented everything that I was teaching in the course. And I heard from my friend several months later, she says, you know what? My cousin bought your course and she did everything that you said in the course. And she used to walk with this walker. And now one day she walks to my house. She walked like 2 miles to come to my house. And she was feeling great, had energy, no longer needed that walker. And she told me to tell you, thank you for the course that you put together. So normally this course is worth $500 Canadian. And I have this coupon here where it's $300 off. So for 200 Canadian, so it's about 150 or 60 US. You have a lifetime access to this course. It's an online portal. You can ask questions in there, and I answer to the questions usually within 72 hours. So it's just a great, great tool to have in your back belt. This is the QR code that you can use your phone with the camera option if you want to open the page, or you have the page here and you just use the coupon Life Over Lyme before you check out. And this is my offer, and thank you for being here. I know we've gone a little bit over time, so I want to respect your time, but I want to leave you with this decisive moment. So this was July 2017. I had been on my protocol for 5 months, 6 months, and I had regained just enough muscles to fly my hang glider. And this is in eastern Quebec in a place called Mont Saint-Pierre. And it's a beautiful mountain overseeing the St. Lawrence River and the Chic-Choc Mountain. It's the tip of the Appalachian Trail. Okay. It's a beautiful site, but it's a very challenging site. And so there I was, on launch and holding my glider and feeling strong. And then I launched and I saw the sun over the St. Lawrence River, and I was flying with my friends going, wow. And I was in the air, touching my muscles and just kind of crying and being like, so happy that I was able to fly again. I was just like, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, that I was able to regain this passion of mine. And then I heard this voice, call it the inner voice, call it the universe or God who was talking to me. But I heard this voice that said to me, Catherine, now you have regained your health and your life, and you've done it in ways that are unheard of. Now you need to help other people do the same thing. And I was just kind of crying, going like, okay, all right, all right, all right, I'll do this. So this is why I'm sharing with you all of this information. In the online course, I go way deeper, but this could make the whole world of difference between being stuck for years with debilitating health or having a tool to help yourself or someone that you love get their life back from Lyme. So I want to thank you for your attention. These are the websites where you can find more information about the course, about the coaching that I do, my Facebook page, Facebook, Catherine Gagnon, Transformational Coach. And if you would like to write to me, my email is inspiration@catherinegagnon.ca. It'll be my pleasure to see if we can work together to help you or someone that you love regain their health and their life. And here are some useful resources. So if you're watching the replay, you can just pause if you want to copy some of these websites and references. And I will be available if you have any questions. Thank you so much for your attention. I know there was a lot in there, and if you want to either ask your questions in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and ask questions, I'm happy to stay.